Oh, estaba poniendo esto aquí para yo te quede bonito. Ahí sí. ¡Ahí está!
There we are. Ready? 1, 2,
This
3.
is-
Ha!
Ah,
You froze. This technology
this is
has.
Sunday leftovers.
Yeah, this is Sunday leftovers after 3 rounds of booting up the software because it didn't want to work today. Here we are. Here we are. Welcome to this edition. So we are now discussing sort of what's left in our minds after the third week of Eastertide, and it's still fun to.
Well, we were talking about food, actually. Let's be honest with the people.
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes people think that we appear in camera and maybe they think, oh, these guys has been talking about the sermon for the last 20 minutes before, the streaming. No, we were talking about mole and about
hechas a mano. Yeah, we're talking about all the good stuff.
Aunque yogues con flaques.
That's right. We're talking about the very profound things now. But reading back, it's been a busy week. There's a lot that has happened since Sunday. It's not always 3 days into the next week, you sort of lose your track and building the next thing. And our next discussion is going to be the fourth Sunday of Easter, which of course is Good Shepherd Sunday in most of our liturgical churches. And so I'm already deep into that. So I always have to turn back on Wednesdays and say, what did we say on Sunday? But that was our second installation in the story where Jesus appears to the disciples. Only this time, the first round from the book of John on the second Sunday after Easter. So it's funny because the church celebrates Easter, this great moment when Jesus comes back from the dead. And the very next week, we go into the doubt of Thomas. And the week after that, we go into the doubt or the struggle or the fear of the 12 as told by Luke. And so now we're switching voices from John to Luke. But last week was one of those rare situations where the lectionary sends us the same story twice, week after week. And so, you learn. Yeah, it is weird. And you learn to pay extra attention to that. One of the things, and you would know this from your studies in the Hebrew Old Testament, but one of the things that we fail to account for is often literary emphasis was made by repetition. So sometimes in Hebrew poetry, for example, it would say say the same thing 3 times in a row. And where we look at that and say, that feels odd. Repetition means something. And so anytime in the ancient world or anytime in the liturgical space, you're asked to repeat something, I think it just means you add a little extra weight to it. So once again, Jesus in those critical days between his resurrection, when he appeared to Mary and Mary began to pass the news to the 12 and to people beyond that period of time between the resurrection and when he floated away at the end of the book of Matthew, or the other accounts have their own stories of that. That's a very critical time. And I think if you had to freeze any one little window of the life of Jesus to sort of distill it for meaning or quarry it for meaning, I think that would be the one to do. And what does he do? What does he do? We don't see him like Reinhard Bonnke doing a conference in the desert with 1 million people. We don't see him buying TV time. That's dumb. Billboards, that's dumb. Thomas J. Henry has all the billboards. We don't see him doing these things. He's not mass communicating. What he's doing is he's going deep into the personal, fearful spaces of the people that he loves. Something I'm going to say this coming Sunday is that Jesus wasn't a great leader if lots of followers was what makes a good leader, but he knew how to go deep with a few people. And so that's what we see him doing. So Luke tells us the story, just before the lectionary picks up where he comes back to the locked door. He had just been on the road to Emmaus with Cleopas and his friend. They turned around, they come back to Jerusalem after he breaks bread and reveals who he is. And then he comes through the door where they are and tells them again to have peace, and then does the most extraordinary, simple thing, which I love so much. And then he just says, let's eat, let's have a meal. Whatever the obsession is with fish, I don't have that obsession with fish. I do like some fish, but not all fish. But in the world of the time of Jesus, fish would have been what you ate when there was resources. And so he basically says, where are the frijoles and where's the mole? Let's sit down and let's have a meal. And it's interesting to me because I think, I was with a bunch of wonderful UMC pastors yesterday from all over the district, with our superintendent, with people who are far brighter than me, who have spent lot more years in the church world than me. And you look at them and we always end up talking about education and what are the next degrees and what are you going to do next. And I met some people who, they're part of UT's PhD in religious studies, which is what I want to do next in my academic life and all of these things. And it's easy to think that it's the complexity of our thinking that gives us access to the truth of the gospel. But nothing could be further from the truth. And when we're wrapped in and afraid and don't know what the next step is, I think it's such an interesting move that Jesus makes. He simply says, turn back to the simple processes. Turn back to the simple processes. No one can still fully understand how it is that we are able to consume ancient matter that's been reconstituted a million times, how we consume it for energy to stay alive and thrive in a world. We can put people in outer space for 6 months out of the year and they can do complicated science. But if you really had to understand, how is it that the energy of ancient explosion matter from stars is now in the flesh of fish that now sustains our body? I think what I see Jesus doing, and it just could be my read from midlife, but what I think I see him doing is saying, when all else looks like a dead end, it's the mundane processes that still speak the deepest truth, which is eating.
I mean, yeah, that is something that amazed me, that there's so many meaningful meals in Jesus' ministry, very meaningful meals. And it's like, you're just about to die. What to do with your disciples, give a big theological speech or something like that. Let's eat together. Let's drink together. Yeah. And after the resurrection, what are you expecting? An explanation about the process of resurrection, or no? Let's eat some fish, or
Yeah, he does. He does 2 or 3 things. He says, "Don't be afraid. Touch. See the scars, right, wherever they were, probably here.
Right.
See the scars. Touch the side where I was pierced with the sword, and let's eat." Somebody served the table. The rest of you come here. Look, how in the world, those things are deeply embodied pieces of evidence or proof, you might say. And, in Luke, of course, I don't know where the Luke language comes around a ghost. I don't see that in the book of John. Of course, Luke then goes on to write about the Holy Ghost. So I'm thinking in Luke's mind, Luke had a whole different direction he was going.
Yeah, he's playing with words.
He's playing with words, and he's writing to a distinctly Greco-Roman world that had a full understanding in their mind of unseen spirits and all the things. Anyway, he writes about a ghost, and Jesus offers, instead of an explanation, he offers, "This is my proof. Let's eat." I just think that, I think in the end, the gospel may be a little bit like music or a little bit like soccer. The more you know, the simpler it's got to get. The gospel is nothing if not another way of stating the very processes that hold the whole cosmos together. We could have learned this in the forest preserve. We could have learned this with a fallen oak tree in the woods. We could have learned all of this. I love the message of Jesus in the story, and I've spent my life studying it, but it's always interesting when he points us back to the simple things. How many times does he do this in parables, especially in the book of John? John loves to show Jesus teaching something in the face of the Pharisees and then turning back to the disciples and then explaining it, right? John had this, it seems to me like John was either in all of the conversations or he thought he was, because he spoke with great authority about conversations that didn't even involve him, it seems. That aside, it's always this turn to the crowd, this is what's going on, and then turn back to his followers and say, okay, so here's what the parable of the seeds means, or here's what it means. But I guess I used to think that Jesus reached for earthy processes like fig trees and buried treasures and fish and nets. I guess I used to think he did that because we were too dumb to catch the deeper truth. But I think what I see now, Cesar, after all these 51 years, is that he's actually pointing to the fact that all of these messages are buried there too.
Yes.
The whole world shouts that all of these processes are being driven by something greater than the moment. It's all connected. I think that says it all.
Yeah, and that is the point when so many other traditions, rather than Christianity, convergen. How do you say that?
Yeah, converge.
Converge.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting. And that is communicating us as religious people something that we need to be aware of. Yeah.
That's right. Well, get ready, because this coming Sunday, we can wrap it here. This coming Sunday, we get to talk about how Jesus whispers to his friends in John 10 that, by the way, my sheep know my voice, but I've got sheep that are not from this fold at all.
Oh, are you planning to go deep into that part of the verse?
I mean, do you even know me?
well, of course. I mean, there's a few strategies to do that. Sometimes you say everything, sometimes you tease people's imagination.
Well, I think in this case, we're going to go into it. I think that, I think if this is just a tease for next week, but I think that when Jesus says, "My sheep know my voice," if we know the voice of God, that voice comes to us saying, "You're not my only people." He wraps it in the same dialogue. It's buried in the book of John. John is as reliable a source of what Jesus said as any we've ever had. Jesus, we don't know what he said. He didn't write it down. John is a very reliable source. And John buries in the same little discourse in John 10, "I am a good shepherd. There are other kinds of shepherds who are in it for themselves. I'm in it for the well-being. You know my voice, and you're not my only sheep." That's profound.
Is profound, is disturbing, is challenging,
alarming. Yeah, it's ecumenical.
That will be on fire.
Well, we'll see.
It will be.
All right. Well, it's always good to see you.
The good thing is that that ANC is the kind of crowd that you will be comfortable to say that stuff, and that's great, because it's great when you share something from your heart.
Yeah.
And it's not like, this is heretical, or this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. No, it's different when the crowd really appreciates that. Okay, this is something that is moving me to the next step. It's opening my mind. It's opening my heart for good. Yeah.
It's a safe place to do that. We've paid a great price to get to that space. I'm not inserting it into the text. It's the text that comes to me. I was telling Shane at church on Sunday that I'm committed to the lectionary because I don't want the weight every Monday morning of getting up and deciding what do people need to hear about. That's too much responsibility. But what I can do is I can take my body and my mind to the text and say, what is this saying now? What does this mean for us? And so Sunday should be fun. We're already deep into it. So
it will be fun. It will be.
All right, man.
Okay, Jason.
Always good to see you. Let's see. Okay, pop quiz. Let's see if Caesar can figure out which side of the screen to do a fist bump on. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
No, I already figured it out. This was Sunday leftovers.